I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My name is Mark, and I want to share the story of how I discovered my wife, Sarah, was cheating on me. I want this to serve as a warning to others who might be oblivious to the signs. We'd been together for 5 years, and on the surface, everything seemed perfect. We had our ups and downs, but what relationship does? We had our own little house in a quiet suburb, a dog named Max, and an adorable little daughter named Lily. Life was good, or so I thought. Over the months leading up to the discovery, I started noticing subtle changes in Sarah's behavior. She became distant, often glued to her phone, giggling at random moments while texting. I brushed it off at first. Maybe she was simply catching up with old friends or lost in social media. But then there were nights when she'd make excuses to go out with her friends. Just a girl's night, she'd say with that same rehearsed smile. I wanted to trust her, but a nagging feeling crept into my gut. It was as if I could sense the tension in the air, the change in her tone when she spoke to me. Things just felt different. The real turning point came one fateful morning when I was getting ready for work. I happened to glance at Sarah's phone on the kitchen counter and it buzzed. A new message popped up and my heart sank when I saw the name, Jake. As in, Jake from her college days, the one I always felt uneasy about. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just innocent catching up. I tried to convince myself to ignore it. After all, I had my own work to focus on, but I couldn't let it go. The following night, when Sarah was out again, I made the decision to dig a little deeper. I swiped her phone, my hands trembling as I entered her passcode, which I had memorized. I know snooping isn't the best way to handle things, but I felt like I was on a sinking ship and needed to know if it was worth staying aboard. The messages between Sarah and Jake were explicit. They were clearly flirting, and it was evident they had been meeting up. My heart raced and I felt sick to my stomach. The final piece of evidence came when I found a photo, a dark-haired guy with a smug smile holding a baby. They were sharing a moment that should have been ours, and I couldn't help but notice how the baby looked nothing like me. I grabbed my coat and stormed out to find Sarah. I needed to confront her, and I needed answers. When I walked into the house, my heart was racing and my hands were shaking. I found Sarah sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, surprised to see me home so early. I wasted no time. "We need to talk," I said, feeling the heat of anger rising in me. Her face paled as I confronted her about the messages. "It's not what you think, Mark," she exclaimed, her voice rising defensively. "Jake is just a friend. You've got to believe me." The lies spilled from her lips, and I felt the weight of betrayal crush me. I had given her everything, my trust, my heart, my life, and here she was, standing there looking me in the eye and denying everything. The argument spiraled into chaos, with Sarah's excuses growing more ridiculous by the minute. "You don't understand how stressful things have been," she shouted, trying to rationalize her actions. I could see the panic in her eyes, and it made me sick. I wanted to scream, to throw things, but I stayed calm, at least on the outside. Inside, I was a storm, a whirlwind of rage and pain. As I processed her words, I was overwhelmed with feelings I never thought I would experience. Shock, anger, and betrayal engulfed me. The realization that my wife had been lying to me, potentially having an affair, was a heavy blow. I felt like I was suffocating. How could she do this to me, to us? But the emotional roller coaster didn't stop there. As the days went on, the anger began to fade, replaced by a deep sadness that settled in my chest. I thought about our daughter, Lily, and how she was innocent in all this. I felt like I was losing everything. I knew I had to make a decision about how to move forward. Should I fight for my family, or should I walk away from someone who had shattered my trust? The path ahead seemed uncertain, but one thing was clear: I would not allow myself to be a victim. My heart was broken, but I was determined to reclaim my life. As I sat in silence, I reflected on the situation. I had to gather my thoughts and feelings before making any rash decisions. Would I confront her again? Did I want a divorce? Would I fight for my family? I needed to figure out my next moves carefully. But one thing was certain: life as I knew it was about to change forever. Days turned into a blur of confusion and heartbreak. I spent a lot of time just going through the motions of life, pretending everything was normal for the sake of our daughter, Lily. The house, once a haven filled with laughter, now felt like a prison. I stared at the family photos on the walls, smiling faces frozen in time, unaware of the chaos that had begun to unravel. I thought of the vows Sarah and I had taken, how we pledged to love and support each other through thick and thin. It felt like a cruel joke. Now, after that confrontation, things were tense between us. Sarah tried to act like everything was fine, but I could see through her facade. It was like living with a stranger. I could feel the weight of her guilt hanging in the air, but she wasn't ready to admit anything. She would look at me with those big, doe-like eyes, trying to pull off an innocent act, but I wasn't buying it anymore. It was during one of those tense moments that I decided to take action. I needed to find out more about Jake and what, if anything, had been going on between him and Sarah. I turned to social media, searching for him. I found his profile easily enough, pictures of him living a seemingly carefree life, filled with friends, parties, and what looked like more than a few flings. I noted his posts, the way he interacted with Sarah's photos, leaving flirty comments that made my blood boil. It was clear to me now that he was not just a friend, he was a threat. One night after putting Lily to bed, I stayed up late, consuming everything I could find about Jake. I learned he was a successful real estate agent, charming and handsome, the kind of guy who could easily sweep someone off their feet. I couldn't help but feel inadequate in comparison. He was everything I wasn't, and it was infuriating. The more I learned, the more I wanted to confront him. But what would that accomplish? Would it make me feel better? Or would it just add fuel to the fire? As the days rolled on, I found myself consumed with thoughts of revenge. I wanted to make Sarah feel the same heartbreak I felt. I thought about how unfaithfulness could not go unpunished. I started to formulate a plan, one that would serve as a reminder that actions have consequences. It wasn't just about Jake. It was about making Sarah understand the gravity of her betrayal. I spoke to a friend, John, over drinks one night. He had been through a similar situation with his ex-wife. You have to take control of your narrative, Mark. Don't let her dictate how you feel. If she's going to play games, you need to turn the tables, he advised. It sounded reasonable, and it ignited a sense of purpose in me. I needed to be proactive rather than reactive. I wouldn't let Sarah's actions drive my emotions anymore. The following week, I gathered evidence against Sarah. I started documenting everything, dates when she went out without explanation, late-night texts, and photos of her with Jake from social media. I even reached out to a few of her friends to see if they had any insights. Surprisingly, some were willing to share. They hinted at Sarah's growing discontentment with our marriage, suggesting she had been talking to them about feeling trapped. That stung. I would have loved to have a conversation about it, but it seemed she was unwilling to discuss anything with me. One Friday night, I decided to put my plan into action. I invited Sarah to dinner, an attempt to bring some normalcy back into our lives. I set the table, lit candles, and prepared her favorite meal. The atmosphere was charged with tension. I could feel the weight of unspoken words between us. "Mark, this is nice," she said, forcing a smile as she sat down. "Thanks," I replied, my mind racing as I mentally geared myself up for the confrontation I had been planning. I needed her to understand that I wasn't just going to sit back and accept what she had done. As we ate, I watched her closely, analyzing every move. She was nervous, fidgeting with her fork, avoiding eye contact. The moment felt right. I took a deep breath, ready to unveil the evidence I had gathered. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something serious," I said, my voice steady. She looked up, her expression shifting from forced cheerfulness to concern. "What is it?" "I know about Jake," I stated, leaning in slightly, watching her reaction. Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" she stammered, feigning ignorance. "I've seen the messages," I continued, watching the color drain from her face. "I know you've been meeting him. This isn't just a friendly connection, it's an affair. You need to stop lying to me." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see her processing the weight of my words. "Mark, please," she began. "It's not what you think. It's complicated." "Complicated? You've made a choice, Sarah. You've chosen to betray me, to betray our family. You have a daughter who needs you." My voice rose, fueled by the anger that had been bubbling inside me. It's not what you think. I was feeling lost, frustrated. I thought I could find some excitement, some validation. It didn't mean anything. She pleaded, her tone desperate. Didn't mean anything. Then why do you look so terrified right now? I shot back, my heart pounding in my chest. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. I could see the panic in her eyes, and for a moment I felt a flicker of empathy. But it was quickly overshadowed by the anger and betrayal I felt. I wanted her to understand the pain she had inflicted on me, the toll it had taken on our family. I wanted her to recognize that she wasn't the only one who had feelings. I had been shattered. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with this charade, I said, standing up from the table. You need to decide what you want, Sarah. This can't go on. I'm not going to be a backup plan while you explore your options. Her face fell as she realized the weight of the ultimatum I had laid before her. The dinner I had hoped would bridge the gap between us had turned into a battlefield, and I felt more resolved than ever. I walked away, leaving her sitting at the table, a mix of regret and fear etched on her face. I was filled with a sense of control I hadn't felt in days. I needed to make a choice, and I would not let her or Jake dictate the terms of my life any longer. The next steps were mine to decide, and I was ready to take charge. The days following that confrontation were some of the hardest I had ever faced. I had laid everything bare, and now Sarah was reeling from the fallout. I could see the emotional toll it was taking on her, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. If anything, I was engulfed in a swirling mix of anger and vindication. I was finally confronting the truth, and it felt liberating, albeit bittersweet. After that dinner, Sarah tried to act as if nothing had happened. It was as if she thought if she ignored the elephant in the room, it would magically disappear. She would go about her daily routines, playing the role of the dutiful wife, making Lily breakfast and helping her with homework. But every time I looked at her, I was reminded of the betrayal, the deceit that had shattered our family. I couldn't pretend anymore. That weekend, while Sarah was out running errands, I decided to take a step I had been contemplating. I reached out to a lawyer for a consultation. I wanted to know my options. I needed to understand what a divorce would look like, especially with a child involved. I didn't want to jump into anything rash, but I had to prepare myself for all possible outcomes. The lawyer was knowledgeable and understanding as I poured out my story. He laid out the options clearly, explaining custody arrangements and financial implications. As I sat there, listening to the legal jargon, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't just a victim. I had the power to take control of my life moving forward. I had to protect myself and Lily, even if that meant making some tough choices. When I returned home that evening, I found Sarah in the living room, watching television. She looked up as I entered, an unreadable expression on her face. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I hesitated, contemplating whether to tell her about my lawyer visit, but I decided against it. I wasn't ready to give her any more insight into my plans. "It was fine," I replied curtly, then headed to my study to gather my thoughts. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the day's events in my mind, wondering how I had gotten to this point. I thought about the life we had built together and how quickly it had all unraveled. I was still filled with a sense of loss, but now there was also a glimmer of hope. I was reclaiming my narrative, and I was determined not to let Sarah's actions define my future. The following week, I decided it was time for another conversation. I needed to gauge where Sarah stood and what she was willing to do to fix our marriage. I called her into the living room after dinner, hoping to have a more constructive discussion than the last one. "Sarah, we need to talk about where things are headed," I started, my tone serious. She rolled her eyes, clearly irritated. "What now? I thought we were past all of this." "Past what? Your infidelity, your lies. We can't just sweep this under the rug and pretend everything is fine." My voice was rising again, fueled by frustration. "Fine, what do you want me to say?" she snapped back, her temper flaring. "I messed up, I know that, but it wasn't supposed to go this far. I just wanted to feel wanted again." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "You have to understand how this all feels to me. I was blindsided. We made vows, Sarah, you broke them. Do you think I'm proud of what I did?" She shot back, her eyes narrowing. "I never meant to hurt you. I felt so alone." Her admission caught me off guard, and for a moment I almost felt pity for her. But the anger returned, reminding me that her feelings didn't erase the damage she had caused. You could have talked to me. You could have shared your feelings instead of running to some guy who is clearly trouble. She opened her mouth to respond, but no. Words came out. Instead, she sat back, her shoulders slumping in defeat. It was a moment of vulnerability, but I wasn't sure if it was sincere or just an act to manipulate my emotions. Sarah, I need to know if you want to work on this, I said, trying to keep my tone measured. If you want our marriage to survive, you have to make a real effort. No more lies, no more excuses. I do want to work on it, Mark. I'll do whatever it takes, she insisted, her voice now softer. I just got caught up in something stupid. I love you and I want our family back. It was hard to gauge her sincerity, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her a chance to prove that she could change. But another part of me wondered if I was simply setting myself up for more heartbreak. Okay, I said slowly. I'll give you that chance, but it won't be easy. There are going to be consequences for your actions, and trust doesn't just rebuild itself overnight. She nodded, her expression serious. I understand. I'm ready to do the work. We both had a long road ahead, and I knew that. There were countless conversations to be had, boundaries to be set, and rebuilding to be done. But for the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the turning point we needed. Maybe we could salvage what was left of our marriage. The next few weeks were a test. Every day was filled with uncertainty and treading carefully around each other's feelings. We started attending couples therapy, which I had insisted upon. It felt like a step in the right direction, but I still had my guard up. The trust that had once bound us was shattered, and I wasn't ready to give it back easily. Despite the therapy sessions, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know more. What had really happened between Sarah and Jake? What had drawn her to him in the first place? I needed answers, not just for my sake, but also to understand her mindset. So one night, while she was asleep, I made the decision to reach out to him. It felt dangerous and reckless, but my curiosity got the better of me. I sent a message to Jake through social media, not sure what I would say or even if he would respond. I felt like a fool for doing it, but I needed to confront the man who had invaded my life and turned it upside down. As I hit send, a wave of adrenaline coursed through me. I had no idea how he would react or what this would lead to, but I knew deep down I had to take this step. The game was on, and I was ready to play. The moment I pressed send, I felt a mix of fear and anticipation. What was I hoping to achieve? Would I confront him directly? Would he deny everything? I didn't know, but I felt an overwhelming need to take control of the narrative surrounding my life. I didn't just want to be the victim. I wanted to know the truth. Days passed, and I was on edge, constantly checking my phone for a response. Each time I heard a notification, my heart raced. I knew it was a risk, but the thought of having a direct line to Jake, the man who had become the embodiment of my pain, filled me with a sense of empowerment. I was no longer passive, I was actively seeking answers. On the fourth day, I got the unexpected notification, a message from Jake. My heart pounded as I opened it, bracing myself for whatever was to come. "Hey, Mark, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. What's up?" I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Should I be confrontational? Should I play it cool? I took a deep breath and typed back, "I need to know what happened between you and Sarah. She's my wife and I need the truth." There was a brief pause before he replied, "I get it, man, but I didn't know she was married when we started talking. I thought she was just having a rough patch." I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're telling me you were completely unaware that she was married? How can I trust anything you say?" Honestly, I didn't think much of it at the time. We were just friends, and then it turned into something more. "I never meant to hurt anyone." He responded. I was furious, but I also recognized a hint of sincerity in his tone. I couldn't let my emotions run wild, though. "You think just because you didn't intend to hurt anyone that it makes it okay? You knew she was in a relationship and you still pursued her." "Look, I get it. I messed up. But Sarah was the one who initiated everything. I thought she was just unhappy," he replied defensively. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me wanted to lash out, to make him feel the pain he had caused, but another part of me recognized that he wasn't the only one responsible. Sarah had made her own choices, and those choices had led her to him. The conversation felt like a dance of blame, with neither of us wanting to take full responsibility. "Just so you know, I'm not going to let this go. I'm not just going to stand by while she plays with our family," I typed, my fingers shaking with anger. "I understand that. I'm not trying to get in your way. If Sarah wants to work things out with you, that's her choice," he replied. I felt a surge of anger again. "But you're still in the picture, aren't you? You've created a mess that I now have to deal with." "Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I didn't know what I was getting into. I liked her and we had a connection. That's all I can say," he wrote back. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of the situation settle on my shoulders. The conversation was going nowhere and I was only feeding my anger by engaging with him. "I'm done here," I replied. "I just wanted the truth. I hope you understand the damage you've caused." I put my phone down and took a deep breath. I felt a mix of relief and frustration. I had learned something, but I was still no closer to understanding what would happen next. How would this affect Sarah and me? Would she continue to have contact with him? I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. That night, I had trouble sleeping. My mind raced with thoughts about my marriage, Jake, and Sarah. I replayed the conversations I had with Sarah, the moments we shared, and the love we once had. It was hard to reconcile the person I thought I knew with the one who had betrayed me. The next morning, I decided to take a different approach. I would confront Sarah again, but this time, I wouldn't just express anger. I wanted to have a real discussion about our future. I needed to gauge her commitment to rebuilding our marriage and whether she truly understood the magnitude of her actions. When I called her into the living room that evening, I could see she was nervous. "What's going on, Mark?" she asked tentatively, glancing at me with a mixture of anxiety and expectation. "I reached out to Jake," I said flatly, scanning her face for any sign of surprise. Her eyes widened and she visibly tensed. "You did what?" she exclaimed, her tone incredulous. "I wanted to hear his side of the story. I needed to know what you were doing," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "He claims he didn't know you were married. Is that true?" Sarah's expression shifted from shock to anger. "I can't believe you would do that. You're taking his word over mine." "No, Sarah," I insisted. "I'm not taking anyone's word, but I need to understand the full picture. I want to know how you got to this point." She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging as she tried to gather her thoughts. "I don't know how to explain it. I felt so alone and disconnected from you. I thought maybe I could just feel something again, even if it was wrong." I felt a pang of hurt at her admission. "But you could have talked to me. You could have come to me instead of running to another man." I know, I messed up, Mark, but I didn't think it would go this far. I never meant to hurt you or Lily," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "Do you really understand what you've done?" I pressed, my voice firm but quieter now. "This isn't just about you feeling disconnected. It's about the trust you shattered. It's about the future of our family. I do understand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right," she said, her voice breaking. I studied her face, searching for sincerity among the tears. "Are you, though? Are you genuinely ready to face the consequences? Because it's not going to be easy." "Yes," she replied, her tone earnest. "I want to fight for us, Mark. I don't want to lose my family." I paused, contemplating her words. There was a flicker of hope in her eyes, but I needed to see action behind the statements. "You need to cut all ties with Jake. No more contact, no more social media. If you want this marriage to work, you have to prove that you're committed to me and to our family." Sarah nodded vigorously, wiping away her tears. "I promise I will do that. I don't want him in my life anymore. I want to focus on us." It was a start. It wouldn't erase the damage done, but it could potentially pave the way for healing. I was willing to give her a chance, but I still felt the weight of uncertainty hanging over me. I wasn't naive enough to think it would be easy. Trust takes time to rebuild, and the scars would linger. "You have to understand that this is just the beginning. We'll need to communicate openly, and I'll need to see that you're fully committed to working on our marriage," I said, my voice steady. "I understand. I'm ready for that," she replied. As I watched her, I felt a mix of hope and trepidation. There was a long road ahead, but for the first time in a while, I felt a tiny flicker of optimism. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. But I also knew I had to stay vigilant. The journey of healing wouldn't be linear, and I had to protect myself while allowing space for growth. The rest of the world was still out there, and the battle for our marriage had only just begun. The weeks that followed were a delicate balancing act. Sarah and I began attending couples therapy regularly, and though it was a struggle at first, it became a space where we could express our feelings without the heat of anger clouding our judgment. The therapist, Dr. Lewis, was a middle-aged woman with a calming presence. She guided us through exercises that helped us communicate more openly, focusing on our feelings rather than attacks. One session stood out vividly. Sarah shared how she felt overwhelmed by the responsibilities of motherhood and our marriage, which had left her feeling trapped. I thought I was just a shadow of myself, she confessed, tears spilling down her cheeks. I wanted to feel alive again, but instead I made the worst mistake of my life. I felt a mixture of empathy and frustration. While I understood her feelings, it was hard to justify the choices she had made. It was difficult to reconcile the woman I loved with the woman who had betrayed me. After that session, I noticed some changes in Sarah. She seemed more engaged, more present. She started planning family outings, taking initiative in our home, and even making an effort to reconnect with me. There were moments when I could see glimpses of the woman I fell in love with, the laughter, the warmth, the joy. But there were also moments when the weight of what had happened would seep back into our conversations, and I would feel the anger bubbling below the surface again. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I noticed Sarah scrolling through her phone. My heart raced as I wondered whether she was communicating with Jake, despite her reassurances. I tried to calm my thoughts, but curiosity got the better of me. "What are you looking at?" I asked, my tone more accusatory than I intended. She quickly locked her phone, her eyes darting to mine. "Just checking social media," she replied, the edge in her voice betraying her defensiveness. "Isn't it a little too soon to be scrolling through pictures of your friends hanging out? Especially when you're trying to repair our marriage?" I pressed, feeling the weight of doubt creeping back in. "I'm not talking to Jake," she declared, her voice raising slightly. "You need to trust me, I'm trying to move forward here." I sighed, running a hand through my hair in frustration. "It's hard to trust, Sarah. You made it difficult for me to believe anything you say. I need to see real change, not just hear promises." She fell silent, her shoulders slumping as if the tension had drained her energy. "I'm sorry, Mark. I know I hurt you and I'm trying. It's just, sometimes I feel like I'm walking on eggshells." "Maybe you are," I said, softer now, "but it's going to take time for me to feel secure again. I can't just forget what happened." "I understand," she replied, her voice quieter. "I'm willing to do the work even if it's hard." The conversation left me feeling more conflicted than ever. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to move forward together, but the shadows of betrayal lingered. Every time she picked up her phone or went out without telling me where she was going, I felt that creeping anxiety return. As the weeks unfolded, I decided to take a more proactive approach to my own healing. I started seeing a therapist on my own, a resource for me to vent my frustrations and process my feelings. Talking about my emotions and fears allowed me to create a better understanding of what I needed from Sarah and our relationship. During one of those sessions, my therapist suggested I write a letter to Sarah, something to express my feelings without the intensity of a face-to-face confrontation. "It will give you a chance to articulate your thoughts, and it may help her understand how her actions impacted you," he advised. So that evening, while Lily was asleep, I sat at my desk and began to write. "Dear Sarah, I want to start by saying I love you. I've loved you through the good times and the bad, but right now I feel lost. I feel like the foundation of our marriage has crumbled, and I'm struggling to find my footing. Every time I look at you, I'm reminded of the pain you caused. I don't want to dwell on the hurt, but I also need you to understand how deeply it has affected me. When you chose to be with someone else, you not only betrayed my trust, you jeopardized our family. I feel as though I have to guard my heart because I don't want to get hurt again. I want to see you make changes to truly commit to our marriage, but I need to know you're fully in this with me. I can't do it alone. I'm trying to heal, but it's hard when I feel the weight of your past mistakes lurking around us. I want to believe we can come back from this, but trust isn't something that can be rebuilt in a day. I need your honesty, your commitment, and your willingness to face the consequences of your actions. Love, Mark asterisk. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter for her to find the next morning. It felt cathartic to put my feelings into words, and I hoped it would spur a real conversation about the future of our marriage. The following morning, I watched Sarah as she unfolded the letter. Her expression shifted as she read through my words, and I could see the weight of my feelings hit her. She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with tears. "I didn't realize how deeply this has affected you," she said, her voice trembling. "I need you to understand, Sarah. I want to move forward, but I need to see you put in the effort. I need to feel safe in this relationship again." I replied, my tone earnest. "I promise I'm going to do everything I can to make this work," she said, her sincerity shining through the tears. "I don't want to lose you." In the weeks that followed, Sarah took steps to mend our relationship. She started being more transparent about her phone usage, and she made an effort to include me in her life. I appreciated the changes, but I also knew we had a long road ahead. There were still moments of doubt and fear, but I was beginning to let some of my walls down. One day, as we sat in the park watching Lily play, I turned to Sarah. "I can see you're trying. I appreciate that. But let's make sure we continue this journey together. We can't ignore the past, but we can choose to build a better future." She nodded, her expression serious. "I want that too, Mark. I want to rebuild what we had and create something even stronger." For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were on a path toward healing, and while it wouldn't be easy, I was willing to work at it. The journey was far from over, but as long as we were committed to each other, I believed we could find our way back to the love we once shared. That night, as I lay in bed beside Sarah, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We weren't out of the woods yet, but at least we were both willing to fight for our marriage. And in that moment, I realized that even amidst betrayal, there was a chance for love to flourish once again. As the weeks turned into months, the healing process became less of a battle and more of a journey. Sarah and I continued our therapy sessions, and I started to see more of the woman I had fallen in love with. She was making an effort, not just in words but in actions. We began to rebuild our relationship, piece by piece, forging a new foundation out of the rubble of our past. Sarah's commitment to change was evident in the way she approached our daily lives. She started volunteering for family activities, initiating date nights, and being more communicative about her feelings. I, in turn, was learning to express my own emotions more openly, sharing my fears and my hopes for our future. With each passing day, the wounds from her betrayal began to heal, though the scars would always remain. One evening, after a particularly enjoyable family outing to the zoo, we sat on the couch, exhausted but content. Lily had fallen asleep and the house was quiet. I turned to Sarah, who was scrolling through her phone. "Thank you for today," I said, my voice soft. "It felt good to spend time together as a family." She looked up, her eyes sparkling. "I loved it too. It reminded me of why we fell in love in the first place." I smiled at her words, but a familiar wave of anxiety washed over me. "I still have moments where I worry," I admitted. "I don't want to go back to where we were. I'm trying to trust you again." "I know, and I'm so grateful for your willingness to work through this with me," she replied, her tone earnest. "I'm committed to being the partner you deserve. I'll do whatever it takes to regain your trust." Her sincerity reassured me, but I also knew that trust was a fragile thing. I needed to see consistency in her actions, not just her words. It was essential that we both continued to put in the effort, or the progress we had made could easily unravel. That weekend, I decided to take the opportunity to check in with our progress. I suggested a weekend getaway to a nearby cabin, just the two of us. I thought some time away from our daily routines might help us reconnect and strengthen the bond between us. I was surprised and delighted when Sarah enthusiastically agreed. As we drove to the cabin, I felt a sense of anticipation. It was a chance for us to rediscover each other without distractions. As we settled in, the beauty of the surroundings enveloped us. The crisp air, the sound of rustling leaves, and the quiet serenity of nature provided the perfect backdrop for a fresh start. That first evening, we sat on the porch sipping hot cocoa as the sun set behind the mountains. The golden hues painted the sky, and for the first time in a long time I felt at peace. "I've missed this. Just you and me," Sarah said, a wistful smile on her face. "Me too," I replied. "I want to make more time for us. We need to prioritize our relationship." "Absolutely," she said, her expression earnest. "We'll make time for each other, no matter how busy life gets." The evening unfolded into laughter and shared stories, reminders of the love we once had. We talked about our future, about our dreams, and about Lily. The walls that had been built between us started to crumble, layer by layer, as we opened up to one another. The next day we went hiking, the trails winding through the trees, and I could feel the weight of our past slowly lifting. We talked, we laughed, and we relished the simplicity of just being together. Every shared moment felt like a step toward healing. As we reached a beautiful lookout point, I turned to Sarah, my heart full. "I'm grateful for this moment for you. I know we've been through hell, but I truly believe we can come out stronger on the other side." Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never want to lose you again, Mark. You're my everything, and I'm committed to doing the work." In that moment, I decided to take a leap of faith. I leaned in, kissing her softly. It felt like a promise of growth, love, and a renewed commitment to each other. As we made our way back down the trail, I felt hopeful for the first time in a long time. It wouldn't be easy, and the journey wouldn't be straightforward, but I was ready to embrace the challenges ahead. We were both committed to rebuilding our marriage, and that realization brought me comfort. After returning home, we established new routines that prioritized communication. We set aside time weekly to discuss our feelings, our struggles, and our triumphs. We also made it a point to check in with each other regularly, ensuring that we were both on the same page. The road to rebuilding trust was slow, but Sarah continued to prove her dedication. She cut all ties with Jake, blocked him on social media, and had been transparent about her whereabouts. I could see the effort she was putting in, and with each passing day, I felt my guard slowly beginning to lower. One evening, while preparing dinner together, Sarah turned to me, her expression serious. "I want to apologize again for everything. I know I've hurt you and I can't take that back, but I promise I'm working on myself and I'll do everything I can to be the partner you deserve." I looked deep into her eyes, seeing the sincerity there. "I believe you, Sarah. I really do. We're in this together now, and I'm willing to continue working toward a better future with you." The emotional journey we had undertaken was far from over, but we were now moving forward with purpose. I realized that while the past would always be a part of our story, it didn't have to dictate our future. Reflecting on everything we had been through, I felt a renewed sense of commitment to our family. Life had thrown us a curveball, but instead of falling apart, we were choosing to grow together. In the end, love, patience, and hard work would guide us on our journey. And as we embraced our new beginning, I knew we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, hand in hand.